Hi, everybody, and we are in the books on the Xi Jinping Donald Trump summit in Beijing. Certainly one of the most consequential summits that we have witnessed in a long time. And yet, very little concrete has come out of it. And on balance, I think most observers are very comfortable with that. The concern was that President Trump is in a weaker political position than Xi Jinping right now. To some degree, that's always going to be the case. Trump, of course, is president of the world's most powerful country. But Xi Jinping is the world's most powerful leader. He has no term limits. He doesn't have to worry about internal polling or midterm elections. Trump has all of those things on his docket, and he's not performing very well right now. He's also responsible for a war that's going badly in Iran, which is causing big economic problems for both the United States and China, though a lot larger for other countries around the world. And he has no one to blame but himself, looking for help from the Chinese, and the Chinese aren't offering very much. So in that regard, much better for Trump not to be perceived as going to China hat on hand. And he did not make public asks directly of the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese leader did, of course, bring up Taiwan very directly and dramatically, and President Trump was well advised and actually listened to his advisors not to say anything substantive in response. He made literally no news on Taiwan, and that is the best plausible outcome that could have occurred. A territory that is thousands of miles away from the United States, that the U.S. government officially does not recognize as a sovereign government, but does not want to be part of China. And this strategic ambiguity, the one China policy, is hard to navigate in the best of times. This not being the best of times, changing the status quo would have been a problem for the U.S. long term, and Trump wisely took the advice of those around him and did not do so. Lots of American CEOs showing up in tour, some of the most successful companies in the world, and trillions of dollars in market cap. And some deals that are getting done, specifically lots of Boeings that are being bought, though not as many as the CEO of Boeing was hoping for, and they've had a challenging few years. And no big announcements on critical minerals from China. That deal needs to be extended because the Americans are still going to be very reliant on China, as will most of the rest of the world, for many years to come. That is to be negotiated in the future. So as of now, not much of a takeaway. The big takeaway is that the Chinese president came out and talked about a Thucydides Trap, which implies that the United States is in decline and that China is rising, and that war needs to be avoided. And historically, most of the times you've seen such an equivalent geopolitical environment, you get a major conflict. I understand why Xi Jinping would want to frame it that way. Trump said, yeah, he said they're in decline, but it's because of Biden, not because of me, and now we're winning everywhere. But actually, it's not true. What's happening in the world is that American allies are in decline. Their productivity is slipping dramatically. Their demographics are mostly poor. They're not investing adequately in technology or yet in defense. And the Americans are. The U.S. has the global reserve currency, the only global military with true global reach, and the only major AI power other than China. And they're competing pretty heavily in that the most important area of technological revolution in the world today. So the idea of a Thucydides trap is wrong. The reason why we're in a GZERO world today is because the United States is unilaterally withdrawing from its global leadership. And that is a big deal. The U.S. doesn't want to promote free trade architecture, doesn't want to be the global sheriff and be, responsible for the lion's share of defense spending, doesn't want to have comparatively open borders, doesn't really want to promote rule of law all over the world, doesn't want to stand behind its own multilateral architecture that it created mostly out of the ashes of World War II. That's very different from a Thucydides trap. China certainly is doing extremely well. Both leaders kind of want to show that they're the leaders that matter in the world and everybody else is kind of second rate. But the countries that are getting hurt here, not the United States primarily, not China primarily, it's the so-called middle powers. And in that regard, the Canadian Prime Minister, my friend Mark Carney, back in January, when he talked about this rupture and the fact that the United States doesn't want to lead, nobody else can, that's a much more accurate description of where the world is. Only problem is that since Mark made that speech, nobody else has been able to come up with any formulation for what you do about it, because the middle powers aren't particularly cohesive and they aren't really capable of providing leadership in the absence of the United States. And neither is China. So, very, very important opening by Xi Jinping, showing confidence and showing the capacity to meet Trump toe-to-toe in a global summit of epic proportions. Showed the United States after Liberation Day that they would hit the Americans back really hard if there was a trade boycott that the United States put against them. The U.S. had to back down. But that's very different from a Thucydides trap. That's very different from getting out of a GZERO world. And for now, that's the problem we're all experiencing. That's it for me. I will talk to you all real soon.